Ladies and gentlemen, when the world seems deaf to your cries, blind to your suffering, and numb to your struggles, you could be walking through fire, and people will still expect you to show up with a smile. You could be crumbling inside, and the world will still hand you a to-do list. That's the brutal truth. Not everyone will notice your pain, and even fewer will care. But here's where the power lies, not in waiting for the world to understand you, but in choosing to rise anyway. Not in seeking sympathy, but in becoming a symbol of strength. Sometimes we must hide our pain not because we are weak, but because we are too strong to let it define us. This isn't a message of suppression. It's a message of transformation, of turning wounds into wisdom, of understanding that life may break you, but it will never bury you unless you let it. When you realize that nobody owes you healing, you stop waiting and you start becoming your own rescue. You stop asking, why me? And start declaring, try me. You don't hide your pain because it doesn't matter. You hide it because you've made peace with it, and now it fuels your fire. Let your scars remind you that you've survived 100% of your worst days. And if nobody cares, then care for yourself even more, because you're worth fighting for. Pain is a silent teacher. Honor its lessons, not its noise. Pain often arrives without announcement. It doesn't always come crashing in, it whispers. It seeps into your soul quietly, in moments when the world is asleep and your thoughts are wide awake. And while everyone teaches you to fear it, to suppress it, there's something no one tells you. Pain is a teacher, not a curse. It teaches you things no textbook can. It teaches you how to breathe when everything feels like it's falling apart. It teaches you to survive when no one is coming to save you. Pain reveals parts of you that joy never touches. It strips you down to your truth. And in that nakedness, you begin to meet the most honest version of yourself. The people around you may not notice. They may walk past your pain as if it's invisible. And it hurts. It hurts when your tears dry on your pillow unnoticed, when your silence screams and no one hears it. But still, even in that abandonment, pain is doing its work within you, quietly transforming you. You learn to listen, not just to others, but to yourself. You begin to hear the silent voice inside that you had been drowning out for years. And in that stillness, you find wisdom. Real, raw, unfiltered wisdom that comes from broken places. It's tempting to hide pain behind a smile, to dress up your wounds in laughter. But healing doesn't begin with pretending. Healing begins when you stop fighting the pain and start letting it speak. When you sit with it. When you stop running. When you look it in the eye and say, teach me. There's no shame in being hurt. There's only shame in pretending you're not. Because every person who ever grew stronger did so by walking through something that nearly broke them. Your pain might not make sense to others. It doesn't have to. It only has to mean something to you. You're the one who has to live with it, nurture it, and ultimately learn from it. There's a sacred kind of strength that comes from understanding your wounds, not hating them, not resenting them, but honoring them, seeing them not as a curse, but as a compass that led you to your truth. You don't have to be loud to be brave. Sometimes courage looks like crying alone and still showing up the next day. It looks like whispering, I'm okay, even when your voice shakes. You won't always find meaning in the middle of pain. Sometimes meaning comes much later, but trust that it will. Because pain never arrives empty. It always leaves something behind, a lesson, a gift, a piece of your future self. When you stop fearing pain, you become powerful. Because then you stop being afraid of breaking. You know you'll survive it. You know you'll grow from it. The world tells you to be strong. But what they don't tell you is that strength is born from surrender, from letting go, from not having to carry the weight of pretending anymore. There's healing in honesty, there's power in silence. And when you begin to honor the lessons of your pain instead of running from them, you begin to unlock a version of yourself that is whole, steady, and unshakable. The world doesn't owe you empathy. Give it to yourself first. One of the most difficult truths in life is realizing that not everyone will care. Not everyone will ask how you're doing. Not everyone will notice when your soul is screaming through your smile. And as harsh as it sounds, the world owes you nothing. We grow up believing that if we're good, kind, and giving, the same will be returned to us. But the truth is, life doesn't always mirror our intentions. People get caught up in their own pain, their own busyness, their own blindness, and sometimes they miss you. That's when you must stop waiting for someone to come and see you, to recognize your hurt, to save you. You become your own witness, your own shelter, your own friend. Because when the world forgets, you must remember yourself. You don't need permission to care for yourself. You don't need someone else to validate your wounds for them to be real. Your pain is real simply because you feel it, and that alone is enough. Giving yourself empathy is not about ignoring others. It's about no longer abandoning yourself. It's about looking in the mirror and saying, I see you, I believe you, I won't leave you. Sometimes we wait for others to do what only we are capable of doing. We wait for someone to rescue us when the truth is we have the power to rise, to become our own safe space, to listen to ourselves without judgment. You have the right to feel tired, the right to feel broken. But you also have the right to wrap your own arms around your heart and remind it that it's not alone. You can be the home you've been looking for. When you start giving yourself what you've always needed from others, something shifts. You stop feeling invisible. You stop begging for love. You stop chasing people who were never meant to stay. It's a painful awakening, but it's also empowering. Because once you begin to show up for yourself, you stop fearing abandonment. You become whole, complete, grounded. You begin to walk through life differently, not desperate for attention, but anchored in self-respect. You speak with softness, but also with certainty. You learn how to cry without shame and heal without needing applause. Being your own source of empathy doesn't make you selfish. It makes you solid. It makes you free. You start to love not just the strong parts of you, but the messy, bruised, broken parts too. There is a kind of peace that comes when you stop waiting for the world to understand you. When you understand yourself deeply, fully, tenderly, you are allowed to show up for yourself. You are allowed to be your own miracle. And in doing so, you become unshakable because the one person you need the most has finally decided to stay. You are not weak for hiding your pain. You are wise for choosing your peace. There is a moment when you realize that not every wound needs to be shown. Not every pain deserves an audience. And in that moment, you do something incredibly brave. You choose silence, not because you're scared, but because you're strong. The world has taught us that strength means being loud about our struggles. But sometimes strength is in the restraint. Sometimes it's in the decision to guard your heart, not because you're ashamed of it, but because it is sacred. There's nothing wrong with sharing your story. But there's also nothing wrong with keeping it to yourself. Healing is not a performance. Growth doesn't require validation. And wisdom knows when to speak and when to simply be still. You're not weak because you keep going without announcing every tear. You're not fragile because you choose quiet over chaos. In fact, it takes incredible resilience to protect your peace in a world that thrives on noise. Sometimes people won't understand your silence. They'll misinterpret it as indifference or avoidance. But they don't see the storms you've survived. They don't see the strength it takes to keep breathing when everything inside you wants to give up. There is wisdom in choosing who gets access to your pain. Not everyone deserves a front row seat to your suffering. Not because you're bitter, but because your healing is intimate, sacred, and not for public consumption. You are allowed to be private. You are allowed to heal in solitude. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your quiet seasons. They are often the most powerful ones. Choosing peace is not about denying your pain. It's about placing it where it can be held with tenderness, not tossed around by careless hands. It's about refusing to bleed in front of people who are incapable of holding your heart. Your silence does not mean suppression. It means reverence. It means you've stopped begging for someone to understand, and instead, you've started understanding yourself. Peace is not always the absence of noise, it's the presence of purpose. It's knowing who you are, what you've endured, and choosing not to let it define you outwardly, even as it shapes you inwardly. Your quiet strength is valid. Your choice to protect your energy is wisdom in motion. You are not hiding, you are healing. The most courageous people aren't always the loudest. They're often the ones who carry their pain like a lantern illuminating their path, even if no one else sees it. So when you choose peace over performance, solitude over spectacle, understand this. You are not weak. You are wise. You are choosing yourself. And in that choice, you become a lighthouse not because you shout, but because your silence shines with truth. Healing is your responsibility. No one else will carry it for you. There comes a time in your journey when you realize that the world isn't coming to fix you. No one is going to sit with all the pieces of your brokenness and put them back together. That work, it's yours. It's heavy, it's messy, and it often feels unfair. But it's also the most empowering realization of your life. Because once you stop waiting for someone to rescue you, you start becoming your own healer. No one else can walk through your past. No one else can feel the depth of your pain. Only you know what it means to carry your story. Only you can decide what you'll do with it. Healing doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for presence. It asks for courage. It asks you to meet yourself where you are scarred, bruised, angry, afraid, and still choose to rise. There's nothing more beautiful than someone who decides, in spite of everything, to start again. Not because it's easy, but because staying stuck is no longer an option. You may cry during the process. You may fall apart. You may feel like giving up. But remember, those tears are not weakness, they're release. That exhaustion is not failure, it's growth. Stop waiting for an apology that may never come. Stop waiting for the people who hurt you to see your pain. Some people will never acknowledge what they did, and that has nothing to do with your worth. You do not need closure to heal. You need intention. You need the decision to stop bleeding for people who walked away and to start breathing for yourself. Healing is not about forgetting. It's about facing. It's about feeling the pain without letting it define who you are becoming. It's about choosing to live, even when every part of you has been taught to only survive. The journey is not linear. Some days you'll feel whole, other days you'll feel like you're back at the beginning. That's normal. What matters is that you keep showing up. Give yourself grace. Speak kindly to the person in the mirror. You've been through things you never deserved, and yet you're still standing. That is no small thing. You are the author of your healing. Don't hand that pen to people who broke you. Rewrite your story with truth, with hope, with compassion. There is no shortcut. There is no magic cure. But there is healing in every breath you choose to take intentionally, every tear you let fall without judgment, every boundary you create out of love for yourself. Your healing belongs to you. And though no one else may carry it, you're stronger than you think. You've already survived the worst days. You are more than capable of creating better ones. You are allowed to be your own safe place. Your pain does not make you less worthy. In a world that often tells you to toughen up, to be okay even when you're not, there's something deeply radical about becoming a soft place for yourself, especially when life hasn't been soft with you. You don't have to wait for someone else to be the comfort you crave. You are allowed to be the one who whispers kindness into your own soul, who wraps arms around your aching heart and says, it's okay to hurt. There's nothing weak about needing love. There's nothing wrong with being wounded. Pain doesn't make you less lovable, it makes you more human. And you, exactly as you are still worthy. Some days, the mirror won't reflect strength. Some days, it'll show you a tired face, red eyes, shaky hands, and even on those days, you're enough. Your worth does not disappear because your joy does. You don't have to perform healing. You don't have to be fixed to be valued. You just have to be real with yourself. And sometimes, real looks like sitting on the floor in silence, holding your own hand. When you begin to create safety within yourself, the world outside has less power over you. You stop begging for acceptance because you've finally given it to yourself. It's not selfish to put yourself first. It's survival. It's necessary. It's the quiet act of rebellion against everything that ever told you to neglect yourself. You deserve to feel safe within your own skin. You deserve to feel loved within your own thoughts. You deserve to rest, to breathe, to be not just when you've achieved something, but simply because you exist. Sometimes, the bravest thing you'll ever do is look at your pain and say, I won't run from you anymore. I'll sit with you until you soften. I'll listen to you until you heal. You're not broken, you're becoming. You're not lost, you're unfolding. And even when it feels like no one sees the battle, know that every time you choose to stay with yourself in love, you win. The world may not know the depth of your struggle, but you do. And that means you know just how far you've come, even if your steps are quiet. Your pain doesn't disqualify you from joy. It expands your capacity to feel it. It deepens your soul, stretches your heart, and teaches you to appreciate the light when it returns. You are allowed to be the one who saves you, to be your own home, to be the gentleness you never received. You are allowed to heal in your own way, at your own pace, with your own love. And when you begin to treat yourself with the compassion you've always longed for, you become unstoppable, not because life stops hurting, but because you finally stop abandoning yourself when it does. Sometimes life will bring you to your knees in silence, not because you're weak, but because the weight you carry is unseen, unheard, and often misunderstood. And in those moments, you realize one of life's harshest truths: most people don't truly care about the pain you hide. They may ask how you are, but few stay to hear the real answer. They may notice your smile, but they rarely ask what it's hiding. But here's the beauty in that truth. When nobody else cares, you learn to care for yourself. You stop depending on the world to validate your wounds and start building a sanctuary within. You stop pleading to be understood, and you begin to understand yourself more deeply than ever before. In hiding your pain, not out of shame but out of wisdom, you become the guardian of your peace. You grow. You rise. You protect your heart not because you're cold, but because you've learned who deserves access to your sacred battles. You heal not to prove anything to the world, but because your soul deserves relief. You become the safe space you always long for, and in doing so, you unlock a power that cannot be shaken by indifference. So yes, hide your pain, not because you're invisible, but because you are choosing intentional strength. Hide it not out of fear, but out of reverence for your journey. Because in this world, when nobody else cares, it is your care for yourself that becomes the flame that lights the path forward. And that quiet, unwavering light is what turns survival into something sacred. You may walk silently, but you are never small. You may cry privately, but you are never weak. You may hide your pain, but you are healing bravely, tenderly, and on your own terms.